Hey, this is Brian Elaine with CrowdScribed, and this is 6.5 Questions with Amena Brown. Is it Amena Michelle Brown?
Well, before I got married, it was Amina Janine Brown.
Okay.
And now that I'm married, it is actually Amina Brown Owen. So
Oh,
Amina Brown's still my stage name, but I am Mrs. Owen now.
okay. Fantastic. Amena is a poet, speaker, event host, and the author of Breaking Old Rhythms, which came out back at the beginning of 2013. Amena, thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Brian.
All right, question number one. What surprised you the most about the experience of writing your book?
How hard it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of writers have the dream of writing a book, and we have read so many good books. And so I guess the idea in my mind was Toni Morrison and Alice Walker and Stephen King just sat down somehow and just took an entire day and wrote this amazing thing and sent it off to a publisher.
Yeah.
And that's not how they did it either, but it's definitely not how it happened for me. It was way more challenging than I thought it was going to be.
So challenging that you not sure if you want to write another one?
For at first, after I finished the first one, I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm spoiled. I'm a poet first, so I'm used to writing shorter pieces. Whereas with a book, it's just a longer thing. It takes longer to edit it. So it took me a little while, and then I kind of started, getting the bug again and getting some ideas tossed around in my head. So I
Yeah.
probably will write another one.
Question number two. There's a lot of parts of writing a book. There's the first draft, there's the major editing, and then the minor edits. What part of that book writing process gave you the most energy?
Hmm. I think the major edits, actually, and
Okay.
I had a really, really great editor. I think this was probably the first writing project that I understood why you need a really great editor.
Okay.
Not so much to only correct your periods and your semicolons if they're placed correctly, but that really the job of a great editor is to pull the writing out of you and to see sort of the holes, what may be in your story, what maybe you've left out, or what maybe isn't necessary. And so my editor, shout out to Dave Zimmerman, he asked me a lot of great questions. Some of them just, I was like, no, don't ask me that. I felt that way when I read it, but when I really went back to have to answer some of his questions, I think I wrote a better book for those questions. So,
All right. Question number three. What are your ideal writing conditions?
my first ideal writing condition is music.
Okay.
Typically, I start with John Coltrane. He's
Okay.
always a great writing companion, and Miles Davis is a close second.
Okay.
When I was writing my book, though, I could write to soul music, but I have to write to something that has some kind of groove. So it could be Erykah Badu all the way to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but I have to have music. I typically can't write to silence.
Really? And
Yeah.
lyrics, words, they don't bother you?
No, no. When I'm writing poems, they do, but when I was working on my book, they didn't.
You probably have a voice that you've worked on, developed over the years, a writing voice for your poetry. Did that translate right over to the book? Did you feel like you needed to develop a new voice? Did you want a new voice? How did that work?
I think the voice in my book is a combination of sort of the lyricism and rhythm, I think, of what I've learned from spoken word. But
Okay.
there were a lot of places in the book where, some different people that looked at it were like, okay, enough of these choppy sentences. You need to cut some of these out. So there
Yeah.
was some of that I had to edit out. But I think my conversational voice, I was trying to combine my voice as a poet and the voice I would have in talking to someone. So I was hoping to sort of get a middle ground there somewhere.
Question number four, kind of with all the time that you've spent on stage doing spoken word and those sort of things, if one of the negative parts of that was that it led to maybe some choppy sentences, were there any positive things that you think you brought from having all that experience into writing the book?
I think when you're a poet, especially a spoken word poet, because you have such a limited amount of time on stage, your opening lines are important. It's very similar actually to comedy.
Okay.
Your opening lines are important, the metaphors you use, the storytelling, and the punch of how you end is also important. So I think in a way it taught me sort of to take advantage of some of those first lines of a chapter. Like how can you begin a chapter in a way that someone is going to want to go, oh, okay, if you're starting with that, then how can I,
Yeah.
you know?
Question number five, people like to say that writers are readers, but I'm not sure that I believe that. Where do you stand on that statement?
Ooh, I think writers should be readers.
Okay.
I think a lot of the time we're not because we spend a lot of our time writing. And I think there's a humility that comes to having to be a reader because that means you have to engage in someone else's work and someone else's style and voice you may like, you may not like.
Mm-hmm.
You have to suffer through in some cases and hope it goes great in other cases. I find that when I am reading, I'm writing better.
Okay.
And in my love for reading, I wanted to write something that I would want to read.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of books that I don't want to read.
Yeah.
I pass by them on the bookshelf and I'm like, I don't care. I don't want to open you. You don't matter to me. And there are other books that totally changed my life. Opening up that book cover to cover changed my life. And I was like, I want to write something that I'd want to pick up and read.
Yeah.
So I think as writers, it would help us to be better readers.
Question number 6. Out of the last 10 books that you've read, how many do you think were digital and how many were actual print books?
Ooh. I think all of the books I have finished recently have been digital books.
Really?
Yeah, I have a couple that are like by my bedstand trying to finish reading them that are actually still like, which I love because I love writing in the margins of my books. So going
Okay.
digital was actually a big challenge for me because I was like, well, all you can do is highlight and make a note. What if I want to scrawl,
Yeah.
in the margin? I don't like it. But I would say all of the last 10 books I have completed, they were on my Kindle.
All right. Question number 7. Last question. Coffee?
Ah, I actually like a little coffee with my steamed milk and syrup.
Okay.
I am a social coffee drinker in the sense that it's other people, like being with other people, that makes me go, I should get a latte. But really, if they put like an eighth of an ounce of coffee and the rest of it was just sugar and whipped cream and syrup, I'm
Okay.
good.
Wow. So you're not a caffeine addict.
No, not so much.
All right. Well, good for you. Well, you can find Amena and more about her book, Breaking All Rhythms, online at amenabrown.com. That's the website, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And to connect with readers and authors, find great books, and maybe even publish one of your own, you can visit CrowdScribed.com. Thanks so much for your time, Amena.
Thanks, Brian.